Good morning. As any of you that have looked at the titles of my sharings, you've seen a lot of quotes from Bob Dylan, songwriter, singer who was, needless to say, influential in my life. He was a favorite, and his lyrics just always seemed to both fascinate me with the elaborateness, the uniqueness that nobody else was doing anything like he was doing. His ability to both be introverted most of his time, and when he was on stage, he had to, by necessity, be extroverted. Imagine getting up in front of big crowds of people and performing. Really sharing what you are with them. Talk about being exposed, vulnerable. And is it little wonder that when he was not on stage, he valued his privacy, he insisted on his privacy, bit reclusive, at least highly selective of the people that he led into his inner circle. And as I understand, this downtime, this not performing time, was when he could rejuvenate, when he could reconnect to whatever his source was, because his lyrics had to be otherworldly. He had to rely heavily on inspiration. Today I used video, a documentary by D.A. Pennebaker, done in England in 1967, when Dylan was only 23. And when I look at the list of songs that he had, some of his most sophisticated, meaningful lyrics were already out there at 23. And I had to remember that he claims to have been performing since 10 to 12, from what I've read. And so at 23, he was pretty sophisticated, pretty worldly, pretty experienced, and definitely a talent of my time. And his recognition by the Nobel Committee that awarded him a prize a few years ago in literature goes far to validate any input that I might have. All I knew is that he resonated with me and he meant a lot to me. And last night, don't look back. And if I had to add anything to this, although the inclusiveness is undeniable, I would take it to mean don't go back. Don't revisit bad times, bad memories. I've always been a person that puts the past behind and moves on to what's now. It's almost like I filed that time, era, experience. I filed that in my library, my all-inclusive library that has every moment of my life. And as I pay more attention, it's become more and more readily accessible. So I don't have to make an effort to go back. I just ask my librarian to find what I needed. And in the moment. And looking back to yesterday, I had a long conversation with my brother, and he was talking about pulling up on the side of the road because he had to take a beautiful picture of the sunset. He's visiting San Diego as we speak, and he was just impelled to pull over and take a shot. He was on a cliff overlooking a beautiful vista, and the sun was just going down. It's quite the photograph. It's quite good. His pictures that he takes with his iPhone are startlingly good. And he said as he got out, he smelled something, a smell that took him instantly, without a question, vividly, to a childhood memory of a place that we used to live that the smell invoked in him. And it's interesting because just recently, when I was 12 or 13, he being 2 years younger means 10 or 11, we were living in American Samoa, Bongo. And I remember being up near the mountain here and smelled something that immediately evoked an almost 60-year-old memory with vividness. I was transported. I was in the streets of the small town of Bongo in American Samoa in 1963. That's when I was there, 62, 63. But it was not only being in the place, but it was being in the time. And we laughed, both of us shared our experiences, and we laughed and said, this is all filed somewhere. This is all available. And I've mentioned before, if I had to rate the senses, the physical senses, I would put smell as the top most valuable sense, the one I would be the least willing to give up. And I always laugh. I have quite a substantial pug nose from my Irish heritage. And I laugh because I was given this big nose to smell all the better with. We have to make do with what we have. Of course, we have alternatives. We can go under the knife. I could have myself a nice little demure, more Anglo nose quite easily with today's cosmetic surgeries. But none of these things are in the realm of possibilities, are in my remotest consideration. I remember riding on a plane and the lady next to me said, "Hey, Korean lady from Korea." And you know, Koreans, they embrace this plastic surgery. They're really enamored with the image that they present to the world. Even when it comes to the glaring, obvious observation that they all start to look similar. I, on the other hand, have always valued my uniqueness. Perhaps part of my American heritage, that we embrace the individual. Anyway, she said, "You know, you'd be a perfect candidate for Botox." And I laughed because she was looking at me she didn't have wrinkles, but I didn't feel like she had full command of all her facial, muscular structure. And I really appreciate my facial abilities to reflect what I'm thinking. So, and I value any wrinkles as part of the masterpiece that I've been painting. I believe that this is our masterpiece that reflects to all who come in contact with us who we are, where we've been. This is the past. This is looking in the mirror. It's all the past that I need. Because it's all brought to the present, just as every sound, every experience, every relationship, everything I saw or heard, taste, or awe with me as I sit here talking to you. But my dream last night, I had the strangest dream. I dreamed that I was a dog. A Taiwanese dog whose family adopted me, bought me from a puppy mill perhaps. And because I was part of the fashion of the moment, here people see a movie, see a celebrity with a certain kind of dog, and they all rush out to emulate without much consideration to the commitment of time and effort and energy and love that you need to put into a pet. Anyway, I remember the confusion of being driven out of my neighborhood and put out of the car, unceremoniously I might add, kicked out of the car, of the only food source of any comfort or care, commanded me unceremoniously, as I said, dump me somewhere in the lower mountains. And I remember I distinctly remember chasing the car as it sped off, chasing the world as I knew it as it sped off. And the point of the dream where I woke up is when I realized my complete helplessness. I didn't know how to care for myself. I've never had to. Everything had been provided to me. And now, in the conditions of lost, fear, and all the feelings that you could associate with watching your whole world leave you behind. And when I woke up from the dream, and all I could think of was my transition from progressive awakening, non-abiding, to use Adyashanti's, progressive awakening, to use my terminology that I've used, to permanent awakening. Abiding awakening, as Adyashanti puts it. That same feeling of the lost puppy, of the abandoned puppy, surrendering, having the world, not surrendering, having the world ripped, having everything that I've grown to know and be comfortable and dependent on ripped from me, dropped off, kicked out. And I've used the words to describe being a baby. I feel like I'm a baby on a sidewalk, on a cold, dirty sidewalk in the middle of nowhere, left to fend for themselves. So this dream just meant to me as this abandoned dog, soon to become a stray dog, either to survive through my own reactions, actions, or not to survive, to roll over and give up. And why this image came to me in the dream of being an abandoned dog, where I had experienced it as a abandoned infant, baby. I even saw myself in diapers. And probably as a puppy, as a dog, I'm probably better equipped to deal with the reality of my situation. I'm probably more likely to survive than a baby on the sidewalk. So I wondered, here's a memory. This is going back. And what was the purpose? Why did I have this dream? And honestly, at this point, I don't really know. But trust me, I will chew on it. I will ruminate, reflect, consider. question, evaluate, as is my want, as my propensities impel me to do. And who knows, the telephone conversation with my brother yesterday, did it create the proper environment, the proper sequence that I could experience this unique dream? I've never dreamt I was a dog before, much less an abandoned dog, going through the process of abandonment. I did see an immediate difference between my experience and the dog's experience. The dog was not an active participant. He just had the bad luck to fall out of favor. And in my event, my regression to being a baby, abandoned baby on the sidewalk, was a consequence, a result of years of evaluation, contemplation, consideration. It was self-propelled. And as a consequence of recognizing Maya, the illusion, the difference between the dog and me being that, as far as I know, he does not have rational, logical thinking capacities. It's more reactive. The proactive part doesn't seem to be there, or perhaps he would have been more judicious in his selection of owners, his selection of human companions. But the beauty of animals is they only know unconditional love. We have to remember that this is what love is all about. And as I absorbed the dream that was vital enough, real enough to awaken me, I considered other things. I looked back at my rebirth. As the Christians say, maybe I had a born again experience. I most certainly did, in the realest sense that recognized myself as a baby on the abandoned baby, abandoned, helpless on a dirty sidewalk. My odds for survival were pretty slim. And I look back on the soon-to-be 6-year anniversary. Well, 5.5 would be more accurate, because it won't be until May 2nd and 3rd, 2019, that it will be 6 years. But somewhere along in this consideration, which I ruminated, reflected on, in the pause between waking up and falling asleep again, I've come to learn, I've come to know, is the best way that I can express inspiration, listening to the divine. I've come to know that each year since my rebirth, my discovery of what's real that was only possible by discarding what's not real, everything that to that point that I was vested in, even though I'd been in the process of questioning. That's what progressive awakening is all about. The examination and questioning of precepts and concepts that you think are built of concrete, what's real and what's not. Fortunately, I always had quite a fantasy life going, and many times it was hard for me to differentiate between what was my fantasy and what was real. But the understanding that I came to is that each year since my awakening has been equivalent of 8 earth years, 8 human years, 8 years as we measure 365 days, one evolution around our sun. So my age now, as I sit here talking to you, is about 44. And I like that number very much, 44. And the first year I was 8, according to this formula that I've come to know. How I know this, why I know this, is really a little concern to me. It's just in the DNA. I don't know where it comes from, but I live in the truth of it. So that first year after my experience, I tended to just blab it out. Guess what happened to me? I made it. Just celebrating the fact that I survived. And just as a child needed recognition, I too needed recognition. And it didn't take me long to discover, probably half that first year, probably by the time I was 4 in spiritual years, perhaps I could label them, I already was beginning to understand that it was best left unshared, best left unspoken, because with the exception of 2 very dear, close people, a brother and a sister, a married couple, they accepted it completely. But everyone else in my world, the people closest to me, anyone that I talked to about it, questioned. And I understand this questioning because I too have questioned others who were bold enough to share that they had awakened. And it was in the 4 to 8, that first year, the completion, the second 6 months of that first year, and my spiritual age would be 4 to 8, I started to recognize that the trap of the spiritual ego, a new and greater and larger and more insidious in most ways, ego was the way of my discarded ego to cling on to a life vest for dear life, your ego will fight you. To claim control over your mind and who you identify yourself as. And the years since I started this series of Zen with a Smile, only last January of 2018, because up until then, up until I reached the plateau of 40 spiritual years old, did I feel that it was an appropriate time to begin sharing, to begin documenting, if not for anyone else, for myself. I began to see that, and this, when I say self, this is the self with a big S, the soul, the spirit of who I was. This has become my life's work as I see it. And if it's meaningful, if it's helpful to anyone out there, I can't tell you how touched I am, how privileged I feel. But if on the other hand, it's ignored or dismissed, it doesn't diminish the experience for me. I'm quite content is the best word. Content with things as they are. I don't need to look back. Don't look back unless something, dream most specifically, reminds me, accesses in my library an experience of a time or place that's appropriate to reflect on in the moment. Here, it seems to be that I was meant to share it. So I don't spend any time looking back, but sometimes it just comes to me. Purpose, intent, who knows? But important at the time.